on the conservative left who might have the ability to over-articulate or the ability to convince in some other fashion, maybe if it's not the money, but maybe it is the money on that side too. Mm-hmm. It's just that it's the fringes that drive not just the conversation, but maybe in the end what the answer will be, even if it isn't.
They speak to the people they incite often, not always, there's always exceptions, but they plant the fear, and when fear gets in the picture, rationality goes out the window. And they're planting fear in people who vote. I mean, 60-some% of the people vote? That leaves 40% of the people who I think, this character thinks, frankly, they don't want to vote for either side because it's not even the lesser of two evils. They don't want to vote for either evil because they're just tired of not being heard. And that's where this guy, you get a three-way ticket, 34% can win. Hitler, as awful as that creep was, won at one point, I think, with a 35% of the vote or something. And look what... I don't even go there, but 30-some% can get you in the seat. And so if you've got your diehard lefts voting at 30% and your diehard rights voting, and they're 30%, they're kind of equal. But then you've got this big clump of people up the middle who are saying, I really can't relate to either of those two guys, but Cal, here's a guy that actually sounds like he's making sense. A little like what I've heard and read about, Ross Perot did to people, although his character was off-putting for others. He wasn't just a lovable, likable media image, you know what I mean? I mean, nothing against Ross, but he just didn't have this warmth and charm, but he sure made sense to a lot of people, and I think at one point he got up to was it 15% of the vote or something like that?
I think that's part of this, though. I mean, I look at my life, and I look at that while I cover this stuff, and this is what I do, so I'm thinking about this kind of thing all the time. At the same time, I really do have to sit down and struggle. I get my paychecks at the very end or at the beginning of the month and at the middle of the month, and so I have to sit down and pay all these bills, and sometimes all I'm looking at is the stack that I know I'm not going to get through. Mm-hmm. And I just got the new bill from all the kids going back to school, and I need $150 for this kid for this set of funds, and I need to pay this other check for these other things for the second kid and more for the third kid. And so we get so busy with that it's hard to focus in on the things that we kind of know academically are important, but in the end, I don't have the time or inclination to deal with it. So instead, I just kind of say, well, that seems like a decent dude.
Mm-hmm. Good enough,
or good enough.
I think a lot of people, this character thinks a lot of people vote on the person that they think will win. You don't want to vote for a loser, even though I really like this guy more. He really doesn't. And a lot of people, let's guess, didn't vote for Perot because there's no way he's going to win.
But wait, I mean, isn't that the point? I know you heard a little bit of the conversation with the whole Sarah Palin thing. I mean, if you think about what we were talking about and the argument that I was making even then and then comparing it to the Obama situation, is you realize what we were doing was talking about sort of a character thing that wasn't even about that. It was almost a personality thing rather than saying, well, wait a second, where was she on earmarks?
Yeah.
Where is she on oil? Where is she on not just energy policy, but what's going on in Iraq? What would she do about X? Instead, we talk about these sort of periphery things because we're so busy that we don't have the time to talk about important stuff. We just kind of say, well, so what do you think of that hairstyle? Nice glasses.
Oh,
I mean, it's
she's
crazy.
A babe or whatever.
Well, yeah.
And good for her if she is. I mean, hallelujah. I just think, ultimately, people really know that they should vote for the person that they want to win. That's kind of a strange concept. A lot of people don't. And what if that's 30% of the people voting taken away from the left and right? All of a sudden, you have someone who can come out of nowhere. And let's look at somewhat inspired in a way, in his own character of a way, Jesse Ventura. He was up against Humphrey and Coleman. These are two huge political powerhouses. And here's a guy who came in out of nowhere with almost no budget and he just grabbed enough attention from people and got them excited to get out and vote, and look who won. You couldn't ever imagine he would win. Same with Arnold.
It reminds me in some ways of two conversations I had when I was over here at the RNC. We had Bob Barr, who was running for the Libertarian Party, and we had Ralph Nader, who was running for the Independents. And the thing is the reason neither of those guys are going to win The reason those guys will not win, I don't know, it's not really a money thing, but that's a part of it. In my mind, is because they're not outlandish enough. They're not inspiring enough in the sense that they will grab my attention. Because you're right. Come on, we all remember watching, and I think this was on Almanac, we all remember watching Jesse Ventura sitting in the middle of these two guys in blue suits. We still remember Coleman on one side, and we still remember Skip Humphrey on the other side. And then you looked at Ventura, and all you thought was, well, hell, we can't do any worse than we've already done. I have no idea what the wrestler's going to do with the feather boa. I don't even, but you know what? Can he really screw it up any worse than the other dudes have? And the fact that we're using that as a default, I mean, we're accepting that, well, he can't possibly screw it up as bad as they have. That's our decision-making process? That is insane.
It is. And $500 million, $1 billion is insane. What should the president be working on? It's been 8 years since the healthcare thing was really touched on. I mean, they did a little bit with the Medicaid and stuff, but, you know, I just had a $50 copay. And it's like, holy cow, where'd that come from? I don't go to the doctor that often. And I'm just trying to, they're not even, politicians don't seem to be touching the things that really matter. Education, no big change there. And so here's a guy
You're
that comes
asking
up
way too much, Paul.
Well, here's a guy who comes up the middle who says, what should people work on? And they tell him, and he makes a list, publishes on his website, and everyone sort of looks at it and says, yeah, it's kind of the way I think too. And then they get in the booth, and all they've heard, his message is just vote for who you want to win, and somehow that resonates. And I think Jesse had no chance of winning.
Do you think part of it is that nobody really wants to talk about the issues because they're either boring? I mean, think of it this way. You can think of the great speeches that have been made in political history. Typically, they're not about tax policy. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not talking about specifics. What they do is they talk about generalities, where you sit down and say, my God, I would follow that guy into hell. I mean, so what you get is this kind of sort of broad, expounding approach to some issue. But it's not about anything specific. But all we know is the guy inspires me. It's like... It's like Moses. You know, Moses comes down from the hill, and Moses has got he's got the 10 Commandments, and he starts talking. You don't even know what he's saying, but all you know is Moses is going to take me somewhere, so I got to follow Moses. Instead of saying, well, what we're going to do is get up at 6:30 in the morning, and we're going to start down. By the end, I've already moved on with my ADHD kind of personality. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes I think that's what America is.
Yep, I think there's room for a middle, and we don't need to the process. This guy views it. Nick, the character, sees it. We don't need it to be changed. It needs to be transformed. It needs to be something completely different. And in essence, I took some of this to heart because I did sort of a history book for WCCO, and now this is a novel. I wrote another novel that's in editing stage basically. In this one, I said I can do it. I sat down and do it, and golly, it works. Here I am. This was my dream, to someday sit in front of a microphone at WCCO. I worked here for 10.5 years, and as one of the announcers told me once, he said, Paul, when you get there, don't sleep through your dream. And that's what's inspiring this character in this book. It's not about politics. The 1 Cent President is about a human who lives and discovers more about how to be human. And I think in our society, with all the yelling going on the left, right, and every other angle, that sometimes it's refreshing, like you said earlier, step back where it's quiet and just get a little, sanity is what it comes down to.
Paul, thank you very much for coming in.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack. I mean that. Thank you. It seems like a trite thing to say, but I'm so grateful to be here, really.
Paul Bergly, the name of the book, The 1 Cent President. Stay with us. We'll get to the poll on News Radio 830 WCCO.